And a very good morning to you. Good morning here from Cheltenham, Gloucestershire. Hope you're all well. We're online, which is great. Welcome to our CeMAP Bootcamp live stream for October. All gone very autumnal out there, isn't it? The leaves are rushing around, the rain's chucking it down. It's all very autumnal. Anyway, talking about autumnal, there's this poor lady who's still stuck out in Tunisia. Did you read about it? The Thomas Cook issue, of course, is just about wrapped up, and I've been reading about that. And the last passenger apparently stuck in Tunisia because she only had a flight-only deal apparently, so she's not covered by the insurance. But I'm sure the British government will go and pick her up, get a private plane across there. Boris will probably go there, get some good publicity with election footing, isn't it? Anyway, point about Thomas Cook, and there is actually a point here, is that 13,500 people were repatriated in the last couple of weeks, which is the biggest sort of non-wartime repatriations in Dunkirk, I think, as well. The other thing as well is that there's pensioners left behind at Thomas Cook. I want to talk about that quite quickly. There's about 15,000 pensioners of Thomas Cook who've now been transferred to the Pension Protection Fund. You might have read about that. The Pension Protection Fund looks after company pension schemes where the company has been dissolved or insolvent. And of course Thomas Cook's been made insolvent. So the pension fund is on its own. But the good news is the Pension Protection Fund does look after those pensioners and people who are due to retire as well. It looks after, let's say, final salary schemes as well. But the best news, of course, is that although Thomas Cook were £3 billion in debt, my goodness, can you think of that sum of money? £3 billion they were in debt. I'm going to talk about that in a second at all. Actually, £3.1 million in debt. The pension scheme is in credit by £100 or so million, which means one of the insurance companies will come along, probably Aviva, and they'll buy it, and then they'll administer it and look after it as well. So I think the pensions are okay. But the point was, though, that they were hugely in debt, which caused them to go bust. And you think, well, why on earth have they got £3 billion? And apparently that was costing them something like, what was the numbers it was costing them? £100 million or so in interest rates charges. Now Pizza Hut, you've probably heard of Pizza Hut, they're the other one in the news at the moment. Pizza Hut have been going since the mid-1960s and they're massively in debt as well. Apparently they've got £1 billion in debt. And why have all these companies got big debts at the moment? Well, but the fact is it's cheaper to have bank loans than it is to issue shares. So that's what they've done it. Now Pizza Hut pay, what's their numbers now? They pay about sort of £80 million just on interest that they have to pay. So any profits they make, 80 million goes of course to pay that. Now if they had shareholders they'd be paying dividends anyway, so it's the same thing at the end of the day. Dividends of course come out of profits. But the low interest rates that we've got at the moment, very low percentages, create what we call zombie companies. Lovely term, that is, zombies attacking the earth, you know. But the point is though that zombie companies are kept alive by low interest rates and a boom economy. But if we do go into a downturn next year, which we probably will do, interest rates may come down a bit more, but of course the downturn in the economy might actually put these companies to bed. So you've got quite a lot of these zombie companies going out there. So that's just a little sort of starter on a bit of a doom and gloom, really. But anyway, just to keep you up to date with what's going on, really. I want to take a look at a topic that a couple of people are asking about this week on Bootcamp. If you're on Bootcamp, you get to ask questions and I can answer them for you online. Now, this particular question is all about monetarism versus fiscal policies. Now, it's in the syllabus, and you need to have an understanding of what is monetarism and what is fiscal. So I'd like to talk about that really for a few minutes, if I can do. Monetarism versus fiscal. Let's put on the whiteboard here for you. Monetary policies versus fiscal policies. Now they're economic policies which there is a brick wall between the two of them at the moment. They're economic policies which governments, progressive governments, use to stimulate or control the economy. Now monetarisms, or monetarists as they're called, have been around since the 1980s. When Maggie Thatcher and Ronnie Reagan over in the US created monetarism as a way of killing inflation that has ravaged the 1970s since the oil shocks of the early 1970s. And monetarism has been going on since till the year 2010s as well. New Labour took it on and kept it going as well, but it's now beginning to see a bit of a problem. Now the whole point behind monetary policies is that they like to control what they call the money supply. Draw a great big round circle here and call that the money supply. In any economy you have what's called a money supply, which is all the money pretty much in the economy that's swirling around and being spent. And the more money in the economy, the more money gets spent and therefore generates turnover and GDP growth and all those good things that we love. Now, money, of course, can be controlled in the money supply by interest rates. And they use interest rates, as you know, to control the money supply. Now, the measure of money supply is inflation. We call that CPI, consumer inflation there, going up or going down. And that's the measure of how money supply is doing effectively. When inflation is rocketing upwards, they use interest rates to bring it down, don't they? That's the whole point behind it. We know that. And they've got this target of 2%. So if interest rates are around about the 2% mark, then the government, the Bank of England's well happy. Mark Carney's chuffed about that. If interest rates start, or inflation starts to increase above the 2%, then they will control that by increasing interest rates to control it. And at the moment, inflation's around about the 2% mark, so everything's fine. Now, as you can appreciate, we haven't got a lot of leeway when it comes to controlling this money supply, because interest rates can go up or down. If they go down, there's more money available because banks lend more, people borrow more. If interest rates go up, people are less inclined to borrow. But of course, interest rates have been really low since the financial crash. So the government, of course, this year and a few years before, have been using quantitative easing. Quantitative easing, what that pretty much is, just increases money supply, because you're putting more money into the system, aren't you? And that's increased the money supply itself. And over in Europe, the European Union, who are really controlling via monetarist policies, have given banks, or their banks, loads of rather cheap money to lend out to businesses and consumers. So the more lending that goes on, of course, the bigger or the money supply increases. And that's how they control the economy, really, with monetarism. But the problem we've got is that interest rates are so low, and on the continent, some of them are negative as well, which is just crazy land, isn't it? They're reverting back to fiscal policies. Now let's talk about fiscal. Now, fiscal policies came in after the Second World War, really, and onwards, up until, as I pointed out there, the early 1980s. And the whole point behind fiscal policies is that you spend. The government, the UK government, let's put that in a little picture there, spends money on the economy. So it spends billions of pounds on the economy by building roads, infrastructure, nationalising industries and boosting industries. For example, Thomas Cook, before they went bust, there was a cry for some money. If we were following a fiscal policy, then we would have put money into it. Back in the 70s, we were putting money into British Rail, all the utility companies, British Leyland. This all allows the government to control the economy. The more the government spends in the economy, the busier the economy gets, and therefore the employment's high and everybody's happy. And that's pretty much what fiscal policy is. It's all about spending. Now, how do they finance the spending? Well, as you can appreciate, the government finances spending through taxation. So you tend to find that with fiscal policies in action, taxation is higher. With monetary policies, taxation is lower. The Conservatives and the Coalition have kept taxation low, as did Tony Blair and New Labour. But the New Labour government or party are promising to increase taxation. How else do they fund the money? Well, they do it through borrowing. They borrow money, which has been the problem. Now, if you take a look at some stats for you, I've got some lovely figures here. I'll pin it up on the screen. For those of you on the podcast, you won't be able to see it, obviously. But this shows the amount of government spending that's been going on since 1998, when New Labour came in. The blue indicates the amount of money that the government's been spending. And as you can appreciate, it's gone up every year since 1998 until 2008, the crash, when it was something like 650 billion pounds a year that the government was spending. So Gordon Brown kept increasing government spending throughout New Labour's territories from the 2000 onwards, which of course created the crash. Well, there's other reasons for the crash, of course. When the crash came along, the coalition government took over and reduced government spending. And that's what all the crises have been about the last 7 or 8 years. The police are crying out for more policemen on the beat and all sorts of things because the government have stopped spending money. So that's the point behind fiscal, really. The government spend or don't spend to control the economy. Now, the new parties coming in for the election, Boris and the Conservatives have promised £12 billion of spending in the next couple of years. So if you think about it, they're going from monetary over to fiscal now as a sort of a policy change, which, not a bad idea, I suppose. The Germans have been criticised in the last couple of months. I don't know much about Germany, but Germany is edging into recession at the moment. They've been hit hard by the trade wars with China and the US. They've been hit hard by China slowing down a bit because they export all their stuff over to China, or have done. Their consumers in Germany don't spend. They're not a spending nation. They're a saving and austerity nation. They always have been since the Weimar Republic. And the government of Germany, of course, haven't got interest rates. They can't do monetary to expand the economy, because interest rates in Germany are negative at the moment, so they can't go much lower. Obviously, they've got QE. They're pumping money into the system with the central bank. But so what the German government aren't doing is spending. They've been criticised that they need to start spending. They don't spend. They've got a fantastic budget-orientated system in Germany. They don't spend as much money as they could do. And what they could do, of course, is spend billions over the next year or so. Their infrastructure apparently is crumbling. So if they spent billions on the economy, then that would take Germany out of recession, or stop them going into recession in the first place. So they're heavy into the monetary side. They're not very fiscally orientated, the German nation. So that's just an overview for you. If you're studying your CeMAP or any other exams, monetary versus fiscal, be prepared with the new government, whoever that is, comes in at the end of this year, be it Labour, coalition with Libs or Conservatives. I think we'll see more fiscal policies in the next few years, a bit more government spending to create an economic boost, really, along the way. Bye. Ha! There you go. Did you like that one, did you? A little bit political, I suppose. I'll keep away from politics as much as I possibly can, because that's not what I'm here for. But it does show you what's going on in the economy, doesn't it, at the end of the day? You've got to be aware of what's happening, particularly if you're a mortgage advisor, so you can have decent conversations with people. Even if you don't have decent conversations with clients on this topic, you can have decent conversations with accountants and solicitors who refer you business. You've got to be knowledgeable in the area. Let's move on then and take a look at another topic for you, which is the topic of buy-to-let lending. Let's take a look at buy-to-let. Let's take a look at buy-to-let lending, shall we, and see what's been going on and where things are moving. There's a few more changes. Now, as you know, with buy-to-let lending, it's where people borrow money to buy properties that they rent out, their landlords or whoever. And it's kept the mortgage industry really busy since the turn of the century, really. And in the financial crash, things dropped dramatically, but over the last few years, buy-to-let lending has increased again. It's rebounded very much since 2016. Now, the problem we've got is that George Osborne came along. Let's put a graphic up for you as well, so you can take a look at this. And for those of you on the podcast, I'll narrate the graphic for you as well. Now, George Osborne came along in the about 2012-13 and was very much worried about the buy-to-let market. He thought it was going out of control. He thought there was far too many landlords buying all the first-time buyer properties, where real first-time buyers should be buying them. And for all his critics, it has worked. His strategy has worked, because the first-time buyer numbers are coming through beautifully now. So they're buying all the new houses rather than landlords, because he's devastated the whole system. And you can see from the graph what's happened. You've got this black line here which shows the market of buy-to-let mortgages increasing beautifully over the years since the crash, and it peaked at 2016. Now, in 2016, George Osborne first of all increased stamp duty to 3%, so the number of landlord purchases plummeted once the 3% surcharge came in. Then he hit the landlords with increased stress rates and coverage ratios, so that landlords couldn't borrow so much as a percentage of the rent that they were getting, so that they were able to borrow much less. And as you can see from the graph, that dipped the market down then. Then you had portfolio lending checks came in. So landlords with more than sort of 3 or 4 properties, the whole portfolio was assessed before they could borrow, and that clamped down even more. Then you had the tax relief changes, which have been phased in since 2017, so that landlords don't get high rate tax relief on their mortgage interest anymore. And you can see therefore that the new home market for buy-to-let mortgages has plummeted really since 2016. It's down considerably. That's bad news. Remortgages have kept okay. That's bad enough. But what's happened therefore is that landlords have dropped out of the market and first-time buyers have come back, which is a good thing in a way, I suppose, if you look at it that way. But there are some changes afoot, which I want to talk to you about in a second or two, because there's more to come, more changes going to really sort of crucify the buy-to-let sector, but we'll wait and see on that one. Now, there's two main changes. The first one is a potential Labour government. Now, John O'Donnell, the Chancellor, has talked about two policies. The first one is what he calls the right to buy. So he might be able to give people who rent properties from landlords, private landlords, the right to buy that property at a good price. It's nothing solid yet in his prospectus, but we might see this coming in. And that, of course, will prevent landlords from buying properties and renting them, because they may have to sell it to their tenants at some point. They may not want to do that. Rent controls have been talked about, particularly in the cities, where rents are capped. They're doing it on the continent. I believe it happens in Berlin at the moment, in New York, in the US, where rents are capped. That's a good thing in a way, because rents going up above inflation is not good for the market, not good at all. Of course, it might mean that landlords might think twice about renting properties out privately. So we'll wait and see on those one. But the biggest change that's coming in is the changes in the private residence relief. Now, I don't know if you remember this one, the private residence or residence relief. Just writing up here on the whiteboard for you. PPR, private, or PRR, private residence relief. Now, as you know, this gives you the ability to buy a property, live in it as your private residence, and get completely free of capital gains tax. We know that. And that's a good thing, because you own a property, you live in it, and there's no capital gains tax to pay. But if you have a second property, or it's a rented property, or third property, or whatever, then you are liable to capital gains tax. But there has been this private residence relief available, which allows people who have second properties certain reliefs against capital gains tax, certain reductions in capital gains tax. There's two small changes coming in 2020 that not a lot of people are aware about. The first change is that you used to be able to omit the last 18 months of ownership. If you lived there for a while yourself, but you were renting it out now, the last 18 months of ownership were omitted from capital gains tax. So there's no CGT on that period of time. Now that's pretty good, isn't it? Almost a year and a half. Now that's going down now to 9 months, or from next year onwards. 9 months in 2020. So less than a year, there's no CGT calculated, but that's not so good. That's a little bit of a change, that one. But the other big one, though, is that you used to be able to get up to £40,000, 40k, of CGT reduction, effectively, which is not bad at all. So work out your capital gains tax, how much it's gone up by, and you could reduce that by £40,000, which is a hell of a lot of money. Now, that has been changed now. They're getting rid of that unless you live in the same house as your tenant. In other words, you've got a lodger who rents one of the rooms, which is what it was intended to do back in the 90s, I think it was. So you're actually living in the property, but you're renting a room out. Then you can get this £40,000 relief from any capital gains tax itself. And that's a good thing, isn't it? So I think accidental landlords, people who inherit properties or are given property, rent them out because they haven't got much choice, or people selling properties can't sell, so they rent it out, are going to be hit hard by this, because of course they've been living in the property themselves for a while, and therefore they're renting it, so they're going to hit hard. So you might see quite a few people trying to sell their houses before April 2020 to make sure they gain these extra tax rates on private residence relief. So you need to be aware of that as well. Some changes, buy-to-let market changing dramatically now, isn't it? Maybe, just maybe, we'll see the rise of social housing, which I think they should do. I think the government and local authorities should think seriously about social housing again, putting money into building council houses again, so people could buy properties and to rent them at a good price, and maybe get rid of the right to buy at some point, because that's just devastated the market for social housing. Maybe there's the answer moving forward on that basis. Okay, some updates for you. That's been useful. Bye. Okay, so there we have buy-to-let market for you. And some changes afoot, always the case. Bit of an update for you on our live stream. We do this once a week, and for campers you get HD video put on the system so you can watch this at your leisure. We've got it on podcast now, so you can access this on Spotify, Google Play or iTunes. You can listen to it at your leisure, usually Monday morning, can sometimes be Tuesday. Boot campers get this and get to ask questions and get extra help as well. So go onto our website, which is www.archertraining.com, to take a look at things, or go onto the YouTube channel paularcher.tv. Enough of that promotion for you. We'll see you all next week. Bye.